Namaste everyone. Thank you for joining in the class. Uh, we have been covering the Mahadashas. Last class we covered Venus Mahadasha, and this time we'll be covering Saturn Mahadasha, which is going to be very, very interesting. Okay, but as usual, before we begin, let's start the class with the Shanti Mantra. Om Sahana Bhavato Sahana Bhunakato Saha Viryankara तेजस्विनादधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांतिश शांतिश शांति Okay, so Saturn Mahadasha, it is a very, very long period. Okay, it is the second longest Mahadasha in the Vimshottari scheme. It runs for a period of 19 years. Okay, and this is the most feared as well as the most misunderstood dasha. Okay, it's very, very misunderstood. All right, and you know what happens is when Saturn comes to play in your life for 19 years, one thing you will quickly notice about yourself is that your sense of humor will be slowly but surely getting lost. Okay, so the old jokes, they may no longer seem funny. Okay, comedy movies may not interest you much. Okay, all of a sudden you'll find yourself becoming very serious, not pensive. Okay, you'll find yourself becoming very, very serious. All right, because this is the arrival of the wise old man, which is of course Saturn. And everything about this period is about the practical side of life. Okay, about having a realistic approach to live with constant work. Okay, so in astronomical perspective, Saturn is one of the most beautiful things to look at in the sky. Okay, if you have looked at pictures of Saturn, just type Saturn pictures in the internet. It is one of the most beautiful looking planets, okay, in the sky. But then from the astrological perspective, it is very, very dry, it is very, very dreary, and it's very, very dead. Okay, and if associated with the eighth lord, it can trigger fear and anxiety within a person. Okay, so in my experience, what Saturn really does is it makes you see the world as it is. Okay, you feel that you've become old. Okay, you feel that you have become matured all of a sudden, and life seems to be sluggish at times. Okay, and life becomes more about taking care of the necessary work and also doing the duty that you were supposed to do. Okay, so Saturn is always about service and duty. Okay, it represents the servant class. And no matter whenever it comes up in your life, you will be called to perform a duty. Okay, for example, you may see some very old people, for example, who are of 60 or 70 years. All of a sudden, they were in retirement initially, but all of a sudden, due to some problem at home, they had to come out and maybe drive a taxi or maybe start a business. Okay, the perfect example of someone rising during Saturn Dasha or Mahadasha is Colonel Lassen Sanders, who is regarded as the founder of KFC or Kentucky's Fried Chicken, as we call it. Okay, so whatever your age, Saturn will call you out to perform your duty. Okay, and this duty can range from having responsibilities of family, having children, people working under you, or maybe even simply serving the government. Okay, some politicians, they achieve the peak of their career during Saturn Mahadasha. Okay, for example, Narendra Modi, he became the prime minister of India during his sadisati. So Saturn is not always bad, okay, as people think it is. So what it does is that it slows the person down in their approach to life. Okay, now people have a perception that Saturn prevents you from reaching your goal. Okay, it does not happen like that. Saturn is all about work. Okay, and it wants you to become a workaholic. And if you have a goal and passion, then Saturn Mahadasha is actually the best time to pursue such a goal passionately, because if you have a well placed Saturn, it will actually do whatever it takes to make you achieve that goal. Okay. And Saturn represents everything that one requires to achieve goals. Yes, to achieve goals, what does one require? One requires to be disciplined, one requires to be organized, one requires to be structured. So this is everything that Saturn represents. Okay. Now if Saturn is the second lord, or the fifth lord, or the seventh lord, or the ninth lord, or 11th lord, in that case, this dasha can also bring some joyful moments, like birth of children, you know marriage, success in finances, and wealth. Okay, especially if Saturn is aspected by Jupiter, it can bring these things. And just like any other planet, if conjunct or aspected by a certain other planet, Saturn will also give results related to that planet and the houses it might rule. Okay, so Saturn, in the Kalpurus chart, Saturn is the Karaka for the 6th, 8th, and 12th houses. Okay, the 6th house represents your work, your illnesses, your obstacles. The 8th house is related to transformation and taxes. And of course, the 12th house is related to moksha. Okay, so that is another reason why Saturn is called as the Karaka for spiritual growth or spiritual development. Okay, so no matter which age Saturn Mahadasha comes into play, it makes the person realize the value of their life, okay, their duty to the government, achievements of career, and also realizing that life is not the end goal of everything. There is more to life than getting married, or having a job, or having kids. Okay, so it's a very say workaholic period. But as I said, if Saturn is well placed, it can give you a lot of success. Okay, so just a minute, I'm getting a call from somewhere. Just hold on, please. Okay, so we run with Saturn through the houses. We know that Saturn has three aspects: the third aspect, the seventh aspect, and the ninth aspect. Sorry, the 10th aspect. Okay, so just like the aspects of Jupiter, the aspects of Saturn also have some special meanings. Okay, the third aspect of Saturn is known as the hammer aspect. Okay, this is where Saturn will hammer you. Okay, wherever the third aspect of Saturn falls, you have to work really, really hard in that field. Okay, on your own. No one will support you in that area. That is the reason it is known as the hammer of Saturn. Okay, Saturn takes away your support system. The seventh aspect is, of course, the desire of Saturn. This is what the prime focus of Saturn is in the chart. And then the 10th aspect of Saturn, people have a lot of good things to say, but this is the failure. Okay, this is where you will fail. All right, so forget the 10th house from Saturn. Yes, Saturn helps you forget. Okay, Saturn is the Karaka for forgetfulness. If people forget something frequently, then it means that they have a very prominent Saturn. So Saturn helps you forget. So forget the 10th house from Saturn, okay, or the house Saturn places its 10th aspect. Okay, that is the house of your failure. All right, let's begin. Yes, So Saturn in the first house. So, for those people who are running Saturn Mahadasha, this 19-year-old period will be about responsibility on each aspect of life, because the first house, it represents your free will. Okay, always remember this. The only free will that you have in the chart is the first house. The rest of the houses indicate what actually happened to you. Okay, what actually happened to you are represented by the other houses. Only the first house is the house of free will. Some people will say that it is the 11th house. It is not. It is only the first house. Okay, so these people, they suddenly they will feel that all of a sudden they have become matured. They become wise regardless of their age. Okay, and this is a prominent place where Saturn Mahadasha can cause premature graying of hairs. Okay, because graying is a very Saturnine phenomenon. And all of a sudden, because the first house is the house of discernment, so all of a sudden the native will start feeling a lack of humor within himself or herself. Okay, not laughing at the same things as they used to, and suddenly there will be some deep love for old antique things. Okay, some old music, maybe some old books on wisdom. And if Mars is influencing Saturn, of course one would feel like running around. But if there is no influence of Mars, then life would all of a sudden slow down for the native. Okay, and Saturn will automatically put the native in a situation where he or she is doing routine and relative work. Okay, and even if you're a millionaire, you will be still forced to do your day-to-day course. Okay, your day-to-day routine work, and still be happy with it. Okay, and there will be a great emphasis on career, practical and financial goals and status in life due to Saturn's natural 10th house energy. Okay, so the 10th house, remember, it has 4 karakas. The primary karaka for the 10th house is Mercury. Okay, that is the primary karaka. The secondary karakas are the sun. Okay, what work you are finding, that is depending on the sun. Okay, then there is the moon. Your mind must like whatever you are doing. Okay, and then Saturn, it represents the work that you do, and Jupiter represents your gains from work. So it has a lot of karakas. Okay, now the third aspect of Saturn on the third house will, as I said, it is the hammer aspect. So it will show a lack of interest in dealing with siblings or nearby family members, and more interest in learning and engaging in the collection of valuable ancient information. Okay, so one will be putting a lot of effort into attaining skills needed to perform their work. Just a minute. Someone is trying to enter. I'm not sure who. Okay. Okay, done. So as I said, one will be trying to acquire skills needed to perform their work. Okay, including an interest in long writing, because the third house represents the house of writing. All right. Just hold on, there is an observation. We're really sorry about the interruptions. The network bandwidth becomes low all of a sudden. Anyways, so as I said, the native will be trying to acquire skills to perform their work. Okay, and they will also have an interest in long writing, because the third house is the house of writing. Okay, and the seventh aspect of Saturn on the seventh house, it shows that the native will be very focused in in maintaining marriage and relationship responsibilities, because the one word that you can associate with Saturn is responsibility. And these people, they will take a very practical approach in dealing with other people rather than hoping for things to fall in place. Okay. And Saturn's 10th aspect on the 10th house can bring some trouble in the work. Okay. But apart from the trouble, it will also bring some great responsibility and a focus on work. Okay. Government, or maybe, the native will be interested in finding a higher status in life through his or her hard work. Okay. So ascendant Saturn is a difficult position for Saturn to be in, because it is the Marankaran sthan of Saturn. Okay, it is the house of the sun. So Saturn in the house of self, it finds it very, very difficult. All right. So Saturn in the second house. So this period will bring about enormous responsibility towards family, family businesses and finances, and there will be a great need to have a steady source of income that will enable the native to fulfill not only his desires but also his duties. Okay. And since the second house is the house of speech, so Saturn can bring huge amounts of wealth through through speaking activities. All right. Or maybe by speaking, by making the native speak up for social welfare and social reform. You've seen people who take up social work all of a sudden. Okay, so this is how Saturn influences. All right. And engaging in activity for social causes will bless the native with wealth. Okay. And the native will be far more conservative with accumulating wealth and hoarding assets they need to feed themselves. Okay, so it makes the person a bit sensitive and a bit selfish. Okay. And the native will be engaged in working or earning money through routine and repetitive work, and there will be unnatural fears from taking risks with finances and a dark undertone towards dealing with the family. Okay. And one usually will have a very pessimistic way of understanding their family and and the people around them. And just like Rahu and Ketu, Saturn is a very separative planet. Okay. And because of this, the native usually leaves their home at an early age to find the real world. Okay. So this slow moving Saturn, it at times it brings about, it brings about, or it transforms someone to a great speaker. Okay. An elite speaker. All right. Or someone who speaks very, very less. Okay. So the third aspect of Saturn on the fourth house, it will show lack of understanding from the mother during this period, and it can also indicate attaining multiple properties and real estate. All right. And there is a lot of pressure upon the mother regarding the responsibility of the house. Okay. And peace of mind that comes only from working, working, and working. So when you work, Saturn actually feels at peace and gives peace at home. And if you don't work, if you slack off that responsibility, then Saturn can bring a lot of trouble at home or with the mother. Okay. And Saturn's seventh aspect on the eighth house shows that one's life will be protected during this period. Why? Because the eighth house is the house of longevity. Okay. And it also shows that for the native, the main focus will be joint assets. Okay. And relationship with the in-laws is either very, very formal or completely isolated and restrained. And Saturn's 10th aspect on the 11th house, it shows a lack of understanding of the network circles and wanting to interact with people through which one can have a, have a secure income. So Saturn, looking at its original house, it shows that with hard work and discipline, the native will fulfill all of their hopes, wishes, and desires. And one will find that their network circles and friends are hiding, they are either moving away or they are simply not interested in them. So one of these phenomena will happen. Okay. Just hold on, guys. I'm really sorry about the connection. Just hold on. Okay, really sorry about the internet, guys. I cannot do anything about it. Anyways, so shit happens. Let's move on. Yeah. So Saturn in the third house. So the third house is the house of action. Okay, and this 19-year period of Saturn, it will ensure that the native takes definitive action towards completing a lengthy task, regardless of the matter or regardless of the subject. And this is the time when Saturn would push the native to put their own effort into making money. Okay, and there would be a great pressure building up between the younger sibling or the siblings in general. Okay, so because Saturn aspects from the third house, Saturn aspects the ninth house and the 12th house, so it can actually make the native move far away from the birthplace. Okay, and this period is usually good for writers and filmmakers from all walks of life, because writing is ruled by Mercury and filmmaking is ruled by Venus, and both are friends of Saturn. And apart from that, Saturn also teaches patience and perfection with technical and creative skills of the hands. Okay, and the third house is the eighth from the eighth. So what happens is, there will be a transformation of a higher kind taking place that improves the native's life. Okay, and the third house is also the the house of listening. So there could be problems with ear infections and boils around the ear if Saturn is not well placed, or if Saturn is in a fiery sign. Okay, like Leo or Mars, or even like Leo or Aries or Sagittarius or even Scorpio. Okay, so the third aspect of Saturn on the fifth house, it shows major responsibilities coming up regarding education or children. And this aspect of Saturn can delay childbirth. Okay, it can delay childbirth. And when it comes to sports and engaging in other mental activities like chess and other brain games, the native will usually do very well. Okay, a troubled Saturn can also block interest in education, because the third house is the house of learning skills. Okay, so the seventh aspect of Saturn on the ninth house, it means one will come across very strict teachers or gurus or even fatherly figures. Okay, and it also indicates that these natives will learn their life philosophy and dharma only through hard work. So the 10th aspect of Saturn on the 12th house, it shows that problems can come in whenever the native will take foreign journeys, either due to work or maybe due to a lack of work. Okay, so Saturn in the fourth house, this in my opinion is the most difficult placement of Saturn, because the fourth house is the Sukha Bhava and Saturn is the Karaka for Dukkha, okay, for sorrow, for misery. So this 19-year-old period of Saturn, the native will be fully concentrated or focused on duty, on commitment, on discipline. And all this will focus on the mother, the home, the issues related to the people of the homeland. And this period will show, will put a lot of responsibility upon the native and his or her mother. Okay, and you may find yourself that during this dasha you are improving the structure of the home, planting, gardening, and striving to acquire land. And there is a great deal of fear towards social injustices that affect the homeland and its political affairs. Okay, and if someone is in middle school, then the educational affairs will actually feel like a drag. Okay, and there will be a tendency for laziness about striving for the goals. So there is a lot of things needed, that will train that not a lot of things needed. A lot of things will show up that will either train the native in becoming disciplined and organized and very hardworking. Okay, and the third aspect of Saturn on the on the sixth house, it shows that the native desires to work hard in a routine and repetitive environment. It can bring about problems with servants and and subordinates. Okay, and the native will have to strive to achieve good ethics and balance with co-workers. Okay, the seventh aspect of Saturn is on the 10th house, so it shows that one will attain the responsibility of of leadership, high status, or will be given a very strong and hard reputation. Okay, and you can be sure about one thing: there will either be comfort from the bosses, or too much work with little or no reward. All right, and Saturn's 10th aspect on the ascendant shows that one will take wrong decisions during this period. Okay, one will also slow down as a person, and they may lack energy to work out and keep the body in shape. And all of a sudden you will find these people becoming very matured, persistent, and patient. Okay, and regardless of the age, as I said, the Saturnian energy will take over very quickly. And if the dasha occurs during teenage years, then it is very common for people to say, to see gray hairs early on in the body. Okay, so do you have any questions till now? If not, I'll just take a break for 5 minutes. Okay, let me take a break. All right. So Saturn in the 5th house. Okay, so during this period of 19 years, the native's full attention will either be on developing skills in learning, commitments, or bearing responsibilities for children. Okay, and the 5th house is the house of Purva Punya. Okay, it is also the house where you take a lot of, you receive the gifts of life. That is the reason it is known as Purva Punya, the fruits of the past life. Okay, so a lack of time and interest in the enjoyments of life is also very common if you are running Saturn Mahadasha with Saturn in the 5th house. So this Saturn, it can prove to be a bit harsh on the native in terms of finding a romantic relationship. Okay, because Saturn is a very dry planet, and it'll dry up the romantic space represented by the 5th house, unless and until another planet is conjunct Saturn. Okay, so if say a planet like Venus or maybe a planet like Mercury is conjunct Saturn, then Saturn will teach the native to learn gradually how to enjoy the small silly things in life. Okay, and Saturn is also the karaka for delay. Okay, so it can actually delay the birth of children. Okay, or if the native manages to have children early, then it can bring too much responsibility that the native will find it very difficult to handle. Okay, and during this period, since the 5th house is also the house of giving and receiving love, so the person finds it very difficult to give out something. Okay, especially if Saturn is also a ruler of 3, 6, 8, or 12. All right, and this is a great position of Saturn to be if the native wants to be disciplined in learning the mantras or ancient studies, or doing mathematics, then accounting and physics. Okay, so all those subjects that require a lot of concentration and persistence are actually brought to the forefront by Saturn, if I could say. Okay, so the third aspect of Saturn on the 7th house can show responsibility towards marriage, partnership, or finding lack of enthusiasm towards marriage. Okay, and usually Saturn Dasha is better if it occurs late in night. Okay, late, not in night, but late in life, basically. So why? Because when you are young, when you are very very young, then you are not trained.
करती हैं हमारे प्रधानमंत्री की कुंडली में, हमारे मुख्यमंत्रियों की कुंडली में, क्योंकि वो लोग राजा हैं, तो राजा की कुंडली में ये सब चीजें थोड़ा सा मायने रखती हैं।
राजा के कुंडली में तो ऑब्वियसली मायने रखेंगे सर, but at the end of the day we are not meant to look at astrology from from charts. You can study charts, of course you can study charts, but at the end of the day it depends on what results are you getting for yourself. Okay, it is a very personal thing, in my opinion. If you are not doing astrology for consultation, it's a very personal thing. Nowadays it has become very very क्या बोलते हैं उसको, it's become very trendy to do charts of politicians. A lot of people are doing that, but anyways, each to his own. Each to his own. Yeah. So as I said, yeah, when we are young, we are not matured enough to realize what Saturn wants us to do. Okay, and because, as I said, because the third aspect is the hammer aspect, so the marriage will become burdensome because of responsibility. Okay, some people may have a very may have a very fairy tale-ish idea about how their marriage will be, And all of a sudden they might find themselves, getting married in a situation where there is only the pandit and maybe 5 to 10 people. Okay, because Saturn is aspecting the seventh house by its third aspect. Okay, now seventh aspect on the 11th house, so this is the best thing to happen. Okay, because friends and network circles will actually help the native to achieve his or her desires. Okay, but then those friends will be very very far, very very few and far, very very few and far in between. I hope I'm using the correct phrase. Okay, but they will be loyal to you. All right. And the 10th aspect on the second house, it means that you may end up making a decision that might require you to suffer a lot from the perspective of the family or from the perspective of wealth. Okay, it can also show that whatever you had accumulated, all of a sudden you have thrown it away due to one reckless decision, and that can lead to poverty. Okay, so Saturn in the sixth house, good position for Saturn to be in, but this is where the native becomes a Hitler. Okay, how many of you have friends or family with Saturn in the sixth house and they behave as Hitlers? Yes, I know because my wife has it. All right. So anyways, even if it is debilitated, the person will behave like a Hitler. So sixth house is the house of routine, daily routine, and this is the house where where Saturn feels the most comfortable. Okay, because this is his Karaksthan. Okay, and in the last class also I've explained the concept of Maran Karan, the Karaka Bhavanashaya. It does not apply here because here Saturn is most comfortable because this is the place of service. This is also the place where he deals with the problems of the world. Okay, so this 19-year-old period of Saturn, it will encourage the native to give or serve others in social causes. Okay, they will also aim to help animals, pets, and improve the health of masses in general. But at the same time, it's not that their enemies will gain an upper hand. The retribution with enemies, they will also be very vindictive towards enemies, but that will not happen in a Martian manner. Okay, all of a sudden, boom boom and the enemies are destroyed. No, it will be in a very slow and steady pace. Okay, but then displacement becomes difficult. Okay, displacement becomes difficult if Saturn is debilitated or if Saturn is in a enemy sign, because then you'd have a lot of aversion for pets or animal life. Okay, and sometimes if Saturn is associated with Mars, all of a sudden you might find yourself taking up butchering as a profession. Okay, so I've seen this personally. Most of the meat sellers, they'll have Saturn and Mars together connected with the sixth house. Okay, maybe Mars is in the sixth house and then Saturn is connected to Mars, or maybe Saturn is in the sixth house or Mars is connected to Saturn. So it can actually make you a butcher. Okay. Okay, Anuradhaji has it. So do you appear as a Hitler in some cases?
Sir, it's my Lagna Lord Saturn. That means a Capricorn is my Lagna. Capricorn Saturn going into Gemini.
Oh, that is.
So, I don't know.
That is
I
actually
have
good.
very strong likes and dislikes. That
Yeah.
in that
It
sense.
makes you very opinionated because Gemini is the sign of opinions also.
Mhm.
So it will make you
But
very-
generally, it's been good. But I've been told that it's good for physical activities and
yeah, but
health.
ask others. Have you asked others for their genuine opinion on what they feel about you? maybe your child will not tell you that mummy is a Hitler, but someone might tell you that.
No, but I'm known to be a strict mom. Like my
Yeah.
son's friends and all, they know that his mother is strict. So that sense could be.
So Saturn in sixth house in the sign of Leo. That's what I said. If Saturn is in an enemy sign, it can become very very difficult. Okay, it can become very very difficult if Saturn is in an enemy sign or Saturn is debilitated. All right. So again, if Saturn is debilitated or if Saturn is in an enemy sign, it can bring chronic illness. Okay, but if it is exalted, it can actually bring you out of that chronic illness which you have been suffering. All right. And the sixth house is also the house of arguments and litigation. So Saturn, it will make the native take a very critical and realistic approach to such things. Okay, one will have a tendency to to shut down arguments and suppress enemies. And this is also a position where you are actually safe from a divorce. This is funny. Okay, you know, because Saturn slows down the process. Okay, so because sixth house is the 12th from the seventh house. So since it is 12th, so it represents breakage of the marriage. But Saturn being positioned there in the sixth house, it slows down the process of divorce. Okay, I would say that people will say, "Chalo, I let this marriage be as it is. I'll not take the trouble of of getting divorced." People have such sort of opinions. Okay, Saturn in sixth and Capricorn, but retrograde. Retrograde means it's 3 times stronger. Okay, that is what it means. So the third aspect of Saturn is on the eighth house. So you can be sure that okay, at least my life will be stable from all the sudden events coming up in life, okay, including the accidents, because Saturn is, as I said, Saturn's third aspect suppresses the house where it sits, where it aspects in the third way. All right, and this can actually become a blessing, okay, because Saturn is also promoting longevity. All right, so the 12th aspect of Saturn on the seventh house, the seventh aspect of Saturn on the 12th house, it can, of course, it can, that is what Saturn wants you to do. That means it will show service towards a spiritual organization. Okay, and Saturn's 10th aspect on the third house, it means that you may not find the you may not find the fruits of your labor very often. Sometimes people may rob you of your credits. If you do something at the workplace, all of a sudden you might find someone else robbing that credit out of you all of a sudden. Okay, so Saturn in the seventh house. Okay, so this is the Digbala of Saturn. Yes, people don't know what Saturn in the seventh house actually mean. People think that Saturn seventh house mein kya kar raha hai. Yes, but Saturn is the Karaka for sorrow, and the highest sorrow comes from relationships. That is the reason Saturn gets Digbala here. Okay, I always say to my clients, always try to have a good relationship. Even if you don't have money, it's fine. But if you have a one bad relationship, it can actually give you cancer faster than cigarettes. Okay, so the highest sorrow comes from relationships, and that is why Saturn gets Digbala in the seventh house. Okay, and as I said, the key word for Saturn is sorrow. Okay, but to derive good time in marriage, in relationships, in business, you have to be very, very committed. You have to be very, very disciplined towards this task. Okay, and that is the reason there is a saying, through sickness and death, when people take marriage vows. Yes, through sickness and death, the groom promises to support the bride through sickness and death. Why does this happen? Because seventh house is the Karaka, seventh house is the Digbala of Saturn, Digbala position of Saturn, where it brings about sickness and death. Okay, so people feel suffering, but you have to understand this. Okay, people feel suffering when they are not practical about what marriage is, what partnership is. Okay, it is sacrifice. Yes, everyone who is in a relationship, it might not be marriage, but everyone who has been in a relationship for at least 3 months, he or she will know that if you are not willing to sacrifice in a relationship, you will suffer for sure. Okay, but Saturn loves to keep things going for a long duration, and Saturn wants you to be married or be in a lasting business, but it wants you to take a realistic approach during this period. Okay, so it is all about focusing on the duty of marriage. Okay, about making business contracts happen, about being cautious, and also about staying within your boundaries. All right, so the third aspect of Saturn will be on the ninth house. Okay, so you have to increase your luck only through your own effort. You will not find anyone to support you. Okay, your luck will have to increase only by your own effort. And then the ninth house is also the house of father and guru. So all of a sudden, when you undergo your Saturn Mahadasha, all of a sudden you will see that maybe your father and guru has started looking very, very old. Okay, so the ninth house is also the house of long distance travel. So there may be long distance travels, not for leisure, but for work. Okay, the seventh aspect of Saturn on the on the ascendant. All right, so that will bring maturity, that will bring a lot of practicality in your wisdom, in your discernment, and it will also make the native work harder to achieve goals. Okay, and the 10th aspect of Saturn on the fourth house, it can actually show separation or loss of the mother during the dasha. Okay, basically it shows separation from the mother, but anyways, it can also show separation from properties. Maybe, all of a sudden your mother has caused I don't know what the English word is, but you know maybe they have disowned you. Yes, maybe there are cases where parents disown children. So this is a prominent position of Saturn. Okay, because you have to achieve your luck through your own hard work, so all of a sudden you might find that your parents have disowned you due to various reasons. No one is right or wrong in these cases, but I've seen this thing happening or manifesting in people's charts. Okay, so Saturn in the 8th house. So again, this is a disclaimer. 8th house, Saturn is good for longevity, but that life can be very, very painful. Okay, that is what I have seen. So 8th house Saturn promotes longevity, but the life can be very, very painful. Okay, it can be filled with diseases that don't allow you to die, but they make you die every day. For example, diabetes. Yes. So for example, cancer, suppose the cancer goes away and then all of a sudden it comes back. So those diseases are represented by 8th house Saturn. Okay, so it can, during this period of Saturn, this 19-year period of Saturn can bring chronic problems. Okay, because the 8th house is where all the bad karmas of the previous lives are stored, and all of a sudden during Saturn Mahadasha you may find pains and aches and other painful things coming up. Okay, so it's all about following a healthy lifestyle. All right, and sometimes it may bring about a fascination for precious metals buried deep inside the earth, because the 8th house is the house of secrets, and suddenly the native may develop a interest in making investments in oils. Okay, in oil investments, or sometimes the native can become more serious about making sure that government taxes are paid on time. Okay, so but for Cancer, Rahu should also be involved. Yes, it should be. But even if I've seen Saturn give Cancer, even if it is an Aquarius, or even if it is aspecting Virgo, because Virgo and Aquarius are very much related to Rahu. Okay. But anyways, you don't have to worry. Cancer can be taken away. Yes, that is for sure. All right. So as I said, there could also be spontaneous travel to foreign lands if the Saturn is placed in a movable sign. Okay, and if Saturn is well placed, there could be a steady growth in joint assets, and your in-laws could be very, very orthodox. Okay, sometimes if Saturn is afflicted, then your relationship with the in-laws can become very, very cold or very, very formal in a good way. Okay, if Saturn is well placed, then the relationship with in-laws can become very formal in a good way. Okay, and sometimes this is also a placement that can show a criminal taking care of their enemies from behind the scenes. All of a sudden you see this person getting shot for no reason. Okay, maybe someone is just pulling the strings from behind the curtain. Okay, so this is very much 8th house Saturn. Okay, so the 10th aspect of Saturn on the the third aspect of Saturn on the 10th house, it means you will be not supported in your workplace. Okay, whatever job you do, your work will be very, very hard. Yes, and you always have to put your own effort in climbing the ladder of success. Okay, you'll have very little support from your co-workers. And the 7th aspect of Saturn on the 2nd house, it shows an urge to accumulate wealth in the name of security, material security. Okay, sometimes if Saturn is aspected by sometimes if Saturn is aspecting its own house from the 8th, then, or if Saturn is looking at its own house from the 8th, then there could be a need to control all aspects of family and family wealth. Okay, then the 10th aspect of Saturn on the 5th house, it can actually show a delay in childbirth. Okay, especially if Saturn is placed in feminine signs, or there could also be a fear from risking money in speculative business. Okay, so even if children are born, suppose someone did give birth to children during the Jupiter Mahadasha, the previous Jupiter Mahadasha, and now Saturn Mahadasha has come in, then all of a sudden the native will start feeling a lot of responsibility. Okay, while raising children. Saturn in the 9th house, so not a good place for Saturn to be in. Okay, because the 9th house is the house of luck, and it will bring sorrow from that point of view. All right, so during this period there will be a lot of responsibility to fulfill the duties of father and the guru. Okay, and all of a sudden, if Saturn is afflicted, then it can bring about death of the father or guru. Okay, and the native will want to follow a very structured form of religion, of spirituality. Okay, but we know that religion and spirituality cannot be structured. Of course it can be structured. If you look at the Abrahamic religions, it can be structured, but spirituality cannot be structured. But the native will look forward, or will look towards those ideologies. Okay, sometimes if Saturn is being aspected by Jupiter, then there would be strict teachings from a guru regarding higher wisdom. Okay, and the native will be able to gain access to higher institutions only through hard work and self effort, because ninth house is the house of higher education. Okay, and the third aspect of Saturn on the 11th house, it will show that you have to earn your income on your own. Your network circle will not really help you out here. Okay, and you'll make very, very few friends, but those friends will be loyal. Okay, if Saturn is well placed, or if Saturn is aspected by Mercury, those few friends that you have will be very, very loyal. Okay, and of course, because it is Saturn, the gains for the native will be slow and steady, but will later on increase immensely in life. Okay, the seventh aspect on the third house, it will show that there will be some issues communicating with siblings due to a lack of understanding, due to a lack of empathy. Okay, and the 10th aspect on the 6th house, it shows that the native might be forced to do something that they don't like. Okay, so for example, if you're doing a business and then all of a sudden something happened, and then you're forced to do a job which you don't like, so that is what the 10th aspect of Saturn on the 6th house will do. Okay, so when this happens, it's better if you engage in humanitarian work or social work, or even fighting for justice through higher knowledge. Lawyers filing free cases for the natives, or lawyers working pro bono, they mostly have this combination. Okay, so Saturn in the 12th house, in the 10th house, so this is the position which makes the native very, very stubborn. Okay, it makes the native very, very stubborn. All right, so it is of course a very strong position for Saturn to be in. Yes, because it brings great stability, and it will make the native work hard for a solid position in the workplace. Okay, but such a workplace will be a factory like environment where you are asked to do the same repetitive work day in and day out. Okay, and this is a position where the native can find a lot of fame, okay, as a hard worker and as a great employee. And the native might find an inclination towards doing administrative tasks during this time, or maybe in being involved in social welfare or social reform of some kind. Okay, but as I said, it makes the native very, very stubborn. Okay, because Saturn is looking at the fourth house, and fourth house is the house of opening your heart out. Okay, so the third aspect on the 12th house, it shows that one will have to make great efforts to understand your spiritual existence. Okay, and they'll also find it hard to control your expenses. All right, and the seventh aspect of Saturn on the fourth house, it might show that the native will have to undergo great duty and commitment towards their family, especially towards their mother. Okay, the 10th aspect on the second of Saturn, placed in the 10th house, is in the 7th house. So what happens is, every time you go to fight with a Saturn in the 10th house, you are bound to lose. Okay, so this is a humble advice for people who are having Saturn in the 10th house. Never go to war. Okay, never go to war with people who have Saturn in the, never go to war with people if you have Saturn in the 10th house, because then you are bound to lose that war. Okay, because the 10th aspect of Saturn is on the 7th house, and 7th house is the house of war. Okay, how will you know? If you will see war, if Mars is in the 7th house, even if you are the most gentlest person on the planet, you'll still see war. Okay, no matter what it is. Yes, people will come to fight with you. Okay. So Saturn in the 11th house. So good position for Saturn to be in, first of all, because the gains will accumulate slowly but surely. Okay. And this period of Saturn Mahadasha, it brings about duty and commitment towards elder siblings, towards social network circles. Okay. And in gaining through the approval of authorities and government figures. Okay. And if Saturn is aspected by Jupiter or Venus, so it can show gaining authority through karma. Okay. So since 11th house is the house of friends and network circles, so the friendships will happen only with those people who are old, who are mature, and who are responsible in towards their life. Okay. And the third aspect on the extended, it means the decision making of the native will be highly, will be highly questionable. Okay. So the native will sometimes, it can make the native blow his own trumpet. Okay. And take decisions that can actually be avoided. All right. And because it is the third aspect, so it can also make the native get gray hairs and gray beard very, very early on in life, regardless of age. Okay. The seventh aspect of Saturn on the 5th house, it'll show responsibilities towards children. Okay. Towards education, and also a lack of interest in making any risky investment. Okay. The 10th aspect on the 8th house, it means there will be problems with the in-laws. Okay. There will be problems with the in-laws. Sometimes, there will be problems with inheritance as well. Okay. And if Saturn is well placed, then the native may take help of occult, or may take help of tantra to destroy hidden enemies. Okay. And the spouse family usually is not supportive in this position. Okay. But if you get a supportive spouse family, you are very, very lucky for Saturn in the 11th house. Okay. Okay, then yeah, Saturn in the 11th house, college days friends used to call me uncle. Yeah, it'll happen. Okay. So Saturn in the 12th house, so it'll give a lot of spiritual commitments. Okay. It will give a lot of responsibilities in affairs which are outside your homeland, not in foreign land, but outside your home city or home place. Okay. And the native will always be a spendthrift. Okay. He or she will not be willing to spend much on himself. Okay. And this is a combination where people can take up the position of wardens, or or maybe doctors in some mental asylums. Okay. If this Saturn is aspected by Jupiter. All right. And usually, most of the work the native will prefer during this period, the native will prefer to do most of his or her work behind the scenes. Okay. And the native will be very, very introverted during this period. Okay. Sometimes, secret foreign trips may happen, but those will be mostly related to work, not for pleasure. Okay. And there will be a great drive to stay up at night and work rather than sleep. Okay. Because, the 12th house is the house of sleeping. Okay. It can cause problems in your in your physical relationships with the partner, because the 12th house is also the house of bed pleasures. So those problems may come in because the native will be inclined more towards spirituality rather than on the physical pleasures of the body. Okay. So the third aspect of Saturn is on the 2nd house, so it means that the native has to build his wealth on his own. Okay. And there will be a great responsibility to towards the family. Okay. And one will be very, very one has to be very, very hardworking and courageous in earning money. Okay. So the 7th aspect on the 6th house, it means the native will want to do service, will be focused on service during this time. Okay. And great love for small animals will also be seen if Saturn is not damaged. Okay. But if afflicted, then such a person will be very afraid of cats and dogs. Okay. So the 9th house, the 10th aspect of Saturn on the 9th house, it shows that the father will have very little or less role to play in the development of the native. And sometimes the native can also get into trouble with the government. Okay. And if Saturn is placed in Pisces or Sagittarius, then one can actually get interested in priesthood. Okay. So I have this Saturn in the 12th house in Sagittarius, and I'm actually planning to get a Kali temple constructed during this, during the next 3 years. Okay, so I made an attempt last year, but it got derailed, and I'll be making an attempt again. Okay, so that is what it means. All right then. So Saturn is covered. We have 2 more planets to go, Rahu and Ketu, which we'll be doing in the next class. So do you have any questions here? Okay, great, great. So I'll just share something with all of you. So this is starting. Okay, this is starting on the 22nd of January 2023. So of course, we're going to be a paid class, masterclass on the Vamsha or D9. Okay, so there are a lot of things, a lot of misconceptions going around the Navamsha chart. People think it is, it is more important in the birth chart, which is of course not true. So I'll be bursting a few myths on Navamsha and also, telling you how to actually use it for making predictions. Okay, so it'll be a 5-class or 7-class series, depending on whatever we want to cover. Okay, so if you are interested in joining, so for the course details and other other enrollment details, please ping me personally. Okay, anyways, thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you next week. Om Gurave Namaha.
Thank you, sir.